Thanks to the film industry, we have the possibility through a screen to feel, observe, and live stories and elements we usually ignore. Important elements and stories that might help us to understand better many things of our current society. My name is Eneida Morales, and in this video, I want to show the main historical and cultural elements that we revised in class and that we can analyze in US filmography. The Patriot, a movie that shows when the 13 colonies like Virginia, North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia, etc. wanted to be independent of Britain. They didn't want to be ruled by the crown anymore, so they start a war to get the independence of the nation. In this movie, we are also able to see the Battle of Cowpens, an important battle where American reconquest of South Carolina from the British took place. 12 Years a Slave. This movie shows how different the North and the South were. The perfect example of these differences is the story of Solomon, a free black man who used to live in New York, who got kidnapped by two men who he trusted and sold as a slave in New Orleans. Since this part of the story, we are able to notice how slavery works, the injustice, the cruelty, and the inhuman treats African American people used to receive back in those days. Gone with the Wind. In this movie, the main character was the perfect representation of the Old and the New South after the Civil War. The Old South is rich in a process of a new society. And after the Civil War, the New South society learned that to live like they used to do, they had to work harder than before. The Age of Innocence. In this movie, we are able to observe the economic growth after the Civil War. Also, gender roles are more remarked this time. Women somehow had to behave, to be feminine, to be beautiful. Meanwhile, men were expected to work and to be the brains and the heads of society. Paths of Glory, a movie situated in the First World War that let us watch how hard and sad was the war, even out of it. The example for this is the injustice the soldiers did judging some other soldiers, saying that they were some cowards. The Great Gatsby, The Untouchables, and Once Upon a Time in America. These movies show us how severe the Great Depression was, how the prohibition of the Terrorist Act, and also how the new money families got their fortune through these illegal activities. Gangs and the illegal sale of alcohol were in charge of the economical progress of the country. Socially speaking, even when the country apparently by these years was against slavery, we can only see African American people as workers. And one more time, women were only in charge of looking good and the house. The Aviator, a movie that shows a different economic growth, but now thanks to the movie industry. They also show how the country got ready to go to war, in this case, the Second World War. Now, it is also shown how the country took advantage of the knowledge of Howard about airplanes and Howard of the situation of the country. Let's remember that it was almost the Second World War. Saving Private Ryan, movie situated during the Second World War in the invasion of Normandy, showing the cruelty of war and what people had to go through. Even when the movie only showed men fighting, we have to remember that women joined this war as well. The Godfather. This movie relates the time after the Great Depression when a huge wave of Italian immigrants went to the United States. They showed how the Italian mafia act and how big their power and their corruption could be, with all this on the politics and the newspapers. Citizen Kane, a film where we can also appreciate how wealthy people can manipulate the media and use it for their convenience. The way corruption and power are used to corrupt even informative media. Malcolm X, a movie that shows the history of Malcolm X, who joined Islam and quickly became a leader of this movement. Religiously, preached how black people must have their own laws and their own people in politics, so black people could be judged and governed by black people, confusing black supremacy with the fight for equality. John Kennedy, a movie that shows how are people out there in higher positions controlling everything for their convenience, like the fight of communism and versus capitalism. This movie is also an example of how people, like I mentioned before, in higher positions, manipulate and control everything. An example of this is the explanation of the magic bullet and also of the murder of the president. Salvador. The fight of the communism versus the capitalism is clear in this film. It is shown the cruelty, brutality, and violence people had to deal with every day in this civil war. Also, this movie shows the importance of journalism and how well it can work if it is loyal to the truth. American History X. This movie shows how far racism and discrimination can go. We are able to observe how Derek goes from the bottom of it, leading a gang that promoted hate and even killing a black man, to his crisis point, where he learned and comprehended in prison that everything he was doing was wrong. Finally, United 93, a hard film to watch due to the realism of what happened during 9/11, a terrorist event where around 300 people were killed. This movie shows us the terror that the people and the country lived during this situation. As we can see, the United States has been through many disputes, violence, and wars to achieve what the country is today. All of these changes and confrontations against the law and the human rights are barriers that the country had to overthrow to be a better place. It doesn't mean that the fight to reach a country of excellence is over yet. They keep struggling with a lot of these problems. Hopefully, the situation will improve soon.